Hey friends, welcome to vesnasstv DIY. In today's episode, you will see my very best spring DIYs, including St. Patrick's Day and Easter. So let's get going. So for the first DIY, I'm going to be using three mason jars. Now these jars were from a friend who was throwing them out, and she had asked me if I wanted them, so I said for sure. Now she gave me a whole bunch, so some of them I've used for canning and a few I've used for decor pieces. So you need three jars. They don't have to be mason jars. You can even have, if you have three of the same ones that you've saved from, salsa or something like that, you could use those. And I'm going to be painting them out in a few different colors. I will be mixing the colors. So for the first jar, I will be using the Country Gray from Rust-Oleum. For the second, I'll be mixing this warm white and cotton candy pink. And then for the next jar, I'll be mixing these three colors together, the forest green, warm white, and the Pacific blue. Now, I'll also be adding a little bit of that Country Gray to each one of those colors just to get a good mix. And basically what I did was I mixed them all together, and then if I thought it was a little bit dark or not light enough or too not rustic or farmhousey enough, I kind of added a little bit more of the gray, if that makes any sense. But I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to be a really muted kind of dull color. Now I did want the jars to look distressed, so I'm only putting like one coat of the paint, and I'm using kind of a coarser brush so that you can kind of see the brush strokes in it, so it looks like these mason jars are really aged. And so as you can see, I'm just doing like a light stroke like that, and then I kind of go over top and add a little bit more, but I only do the one coat. I don't go back over it once they dry. I do on one of them just because I'm patching up a spot that I missed. The next one added a dab of pink and a dab of the warm white, and then I went and I put a little bit more of the pink, and I was using the same brush that I used for the gray with the Country Gray, so it kind of gives it that muted gray look as well, grayish pink look. And then for the third jar, I did a combination of the warm white, the forest green, and then I added a little blob of the gray. I did not wind up using the blue. The blue I will be using for the next project. I thought I might add it in here, but then after I saw the way that it came out, I did not add it. So if you guys haven't been to my channel before, my name is Vesna, and I do all things DIY, home decor on a budget. So all the little DIYs that I make, they are for my home. I do seasonal decor and just any kind of DIYs that I need for my house, I create on this channel, and I try to really do it on a budget. So if that's the kind of stuff you like and you haven't subscribed, please do consider subscribing. And hitting that notification bell so you can see when I make new videos. Once the jars dry, I then need to attach them together. So what I'm actually doing is using a combination of hot glue and weld bond, and I'm attaching them one to another, and then I'll be attaching a piece of jute rope around, and I'll go a few times around at the bottom and kind of in between, just to kind of give it an illusion of it being a caddy. I'm not going to be carrying this around, but if you wanted to make it a little bit more sturdy, if you're worried that it might fall apart with the glue, it won't, but if you're worried that it will, you can always put a piece of craft, like a craft stick at the bottom, or a piece of wood, or a paint stick, like a stir stick, and attach it to the bottom with some hot glue and some either E6000 or Weld Bond, whichever you have, and that will it'll just give you an additional support system for these jars. But I did not use that, but I'm just letting you know if that's kind of your worry, then you can attach that at the bottom and it'll just stick them all together. Once they were attached, I decided that I wanted to distress them further. So I used some of the Rust-Oleum decorative glaze in Java. So I applied it with a little brush, a bigger brush, and then I blended everything in with a rag. Don't push too hard because if you haven't protected these, so sealed them, which I haven't because I wanted to put the decorative glaze on, you might take some of the paint off. So do a really gentle scrub when you blend it all together. And you don't have to do this process. I just wanted them to look a little bit more messy, if that makes sense, or dirty. Kind of old, like really, really old. I added the glaze all around, even in the back of the jars. And then I picked up some floral picks at the Dollar Tree. You can put anything you want in this. If you have fresh flowers, I can't wait to use some fresh peonies or forsythia, anything that kind of blooms in the spring, even tulips or hyacinths if you have them. You can use them because these are glass jars, so you can put that in there and you can use them like vases. But because we still have, 15 feet of snow, not literally, but we still have lots of snow and it's very cold outside, I picked up some floral picks at the Dollar Tree, just green ones which remind me of spring, and I popped them into the jars. I absolutely love spring, so I can't wait for the flowers to start coming up. The winter's so long and so dark, and spring just reminds me of of happiness and brightness and sunshine and warmth. So I'm really excited to be doing these spring DIYs and adding these nice florals and putting them all around my house to brighten it up and make it look warmer. So here is what they look like all finished. So I start off with this piece of scrap wood that my husband got from his work, and I cut it into house shapes, three different sizes. Now I've seen these like wooden house shapes at the Dollar Tree, like these little signs. I've seen them online, but I could not find them in person, so I decided to make my own. And I painted them in the Rust-Oleum chalked linen white paint. I did 2 coats of the paint just so I could get a nice coverage of these houses. I may use the other side of the houses for a different season. I haven't decided, but for now, this will be for spring and it will carry on to summer because of the way I'm going to decorate them. After applying another coat, I go ahead and I distress them by using some black acrylic paint just from the Dollar Tree, and I dry brush on some of the black. So dry brushing is when you dab a little bit of black paint and then you dab it off on a paper towel or something, just so you just get a little bit of paint on your brush, not too much. And I always like doing this because it's so easy. If you put too much on, you can always take some off. So never worry about doing too much. I don't really have kind of like a set method. The way I do this is I look at it. If it needs more, I add a little bit more. If it needs less, then I just go over top of it with the base paint. So in this case, it would be the white. Once that is done, I go ahead and I wrap the houses in 2 different colors of twine. And I'm using just brown twine and green twine. And again, all I do is just start it on one end, hot glue it to the side, and then wrap it around. So I apologize for the cat. As I am doing this video, he's basically screaming, is like whatever the meowing is, and it's just for attention. He's trying to get me to pet him, but he's actually not coming to me, so I apologize for all the noise. So anyway, I hot glue the sides down, and I wrap the brown twine several times and I wrap the green twine several times just to get kind of an X effect with both colors. So if you haven't been to my channel, again, my name is Vesna and this is my DIY channel where I do all sorts of DIYs on a budget. They're home decor DIYs and they're Dollar Tree, thrift tulips, trash treasures, anything that basically I can create beautifully, and on a budget, I do it. I really like the rustic farmhouse style, so that's usually what I lean towards, but I do have some different styles on there too. If that's the kind of stuff you like, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, leave me a comment just saying hi that you subscribed, and hit that notification bell so you can see when I post new videos. So once I finish with the twine rope, then I go ahead and I write in some words on these houses. Now I was going to use my Cricut and just apply the vinyl to the pieces, but then I thought that handwriting them would be just as nice, and I'm doing the Ray Dunn font for two of them and just a Hello Spring with two different kind of styles of writing. And for the Ray Dunn, I just kind of try to replicate the skinny font, but I'm sure with the Cricut it would have been a little bit more professional, but I was afraid because it's so small that it would actually tear up the vinyl and not look as nice. And also for the people who don't have a Cricut, it's nice to see that all of these things can be created just with a little bit of patience and a pencil in case you make a mistake. And again, the great thing about all of this is if you make a mistake and you can't erase it, you just paint over it and you start again. So whenever I do freehand write things, I try to start with the middle letter in the middle and then work my way out from each side. That way I can make sure that it's kind of somewhat even on both sides. And I'm writing gather, home, and hello spring. Obviously you can write whatever you'd like. This is just what I chose to write on these. The hello spring will obviously just stay for spring, but like I said, I may use the other side for other seasons. And then once that is done, I go ahead and I attach some florals to these just to give it that spring vibe. Just using one branch of a leftover floral pick for these two, and then for the Hello Spring, I'm just using the tops of flowers. I think they're supposed to be dandelions, whatever these flowers are. Again, from the Dollar Tree, you can pick them up now. They have them. I purchased those flowers now. This other pick I purchased a while back, but they have them again. So excited to make these. I picked up 4 of these little clay flower pots from the Dollar Tree. They're $1.25 for 2 of them, or $1 if you're in the States. We're in Canada, so everything is $1.25. And I'm just going to be painting them out in the chalked linen white paint again. As you can see, I use this paint often. I have this big bucket of it, and it goes a long way. So I'm only using 3 of them, and like I said, I'm going to be painting them out. I only need to do 1 coat. It covers them pretty nicely. So I'm just curious, does everyone decorate for spring first and then Easter, or do you guys do spring and Easter together? And if so, when do you start with that? When do you end your winter decor and then start with your spring? I'm curious to know. I'm jumping right into spring. Actually, this past weekend, I decorated for spring. I'm going to be decorating for Easter really soon. I just need to finish making my DIYs. There's a few things that I want to make still, and I will be ready for spring and Easter probably maybe the first week of March, I'm assuming. At least for Easter. For spring, I'll be ready now, but for Easter, I'll be ready then. And I'm hoping next year that I can start decorating earlier and maybe start my DIYs a bit earlier, so that way they're ready to go when I'm ready to decorate. But anyway, let me know in the comments below when you start your decorating, and if you do spring and Easter together, or do you separate them. So for this DIY, I did use my Cricut. I used my Cricut to write the words grow, plant, and bloom. And I just used the skinny font for this. I downloaded the font, I believe, from DaFont. So I'm just cutting out the words, and then I'm going to be weeding them and just applying the vinyl. This is a permanent black vinyl, so I'm just going to take off what I don't need, use some transfer paper. I always use shelf liner as transfer paper, so I'm going to use my transfer paper, and I'm going to stick them on. The vinyl itself has a sticky back, so I don't need to worry about gluing it or anything like that. You can Mod Podge these after just to protect them a little bit more. I'm not going to. They're just going to be sitting on a tray. No one's going to be touching them, so it should be fine. Once I put the words on, I used some dry floral foam from the Dollar Tree again, and I cut little pieces just so I could fit them into the pot. You don't need much. You literally just need a few squares. And this was just so that I could squish the picks into there. And I'm using, it's thistle. I said it was dandelion before because I used the tops of that, but it's thistle. Again from the Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting one branch and I'm using it in all three containers, and then I use another branch that I cut and I use it in all three containers. And this is just so it goes a longer way. I cut off the length as much as I need to, and I'm using purple and green. And then I decide after that I want a little bit more and I add yellow, but I didn't use all of the yellow and all of the green. This next DIY, I'm using another scrap piece of wood. This is just a piece of a 2x4 that was left over that I cut into pieces. I wanted to spell out the word spring, and I apparently thought that, spring only had 5 letters in it, not 6. So I went ahead and I painted everything, and when I was putting the letters on, I realized I was missing a block. I don't know what I was thinking, but I wasn't thinking straight. But then I still had a piece of that wood, so I went back and cut it and painted it out again. But I had a bit of a brain fart, I guess. So after I cut them down, I sanded them down a little bit just to make sure that I didn't have pieces of wood that could get stuck in my fingers. And I painted them out again in that chalked Rust-Oleum chalked linen white paint. And I only did one coat on these because I am putting a piece of burlap over top of them, so it didn't matter if it wasn't fully 100% white. After they dry, I go ahead and I add the burlap. Now the burlap that I'm using is the burlap ribbon, and I think this is from Dollarama, not from Dollar Tree, but I believe they would probably have this at the Dollar Tree as well. I don't know. Our Dollar Tree is kind of scattered, so sometimes we have things, sometimes we don't, and then I don't ever remember where I buy things, but it was from the dollar store. It's kind of like the ribbon, the burlap ribbon, but the wider one. So I'm cutting it to the amount that I need lengthwise, and then I'm just cutting it down so that it doesn't cover. I don't want it to cover the entire block. I still want some of the white showing, but I want it to pretty much cover the blocks. I measured these blocks to be about 2.5 inches wide by 2 inches tall. Not, again, when I was cutting them, I put little lines, but if if the saw slipped or whatever, I wasn't too concerned if they were a little bit different. And same with the burlap. If one was a little bit bigger than the other, it was okay because I wanted it to look kind of rustic anyway. And I find that it's really hard to get things really perfect, especially when you're cutting things like this burlap, just because it frays a little bit and whatnot. So it's okay if they look more rustic. And if you watch any of my videos, that's kind of the style I like anyway. Once I cut them to size, then I go ahead and I apply the burlap. Now you'll see some of the wood is still showing on the parts where I was holding it. I do go back and I paint it, I just didn't show that on the video. I just wanted a spot to hold them, and then once I applied the burlap, then I went back and painted over top of those little spots. And again, just using hot glue, applying it all around the burlap, and then cutting. If it's covering completely, then I cut off as much as I need to, and I add more burlap if I need to. As I said, I will be writing the word spring on here. I've written on burlap before, and I really didn't like the way it turned out, like if I tried to do it with a marker. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to cut felt, and I do have a Cricut, but I have the Cricut Explorer, and I know there's ways you can cut felt, but I didn't have the materials that I needed to cut it or the patience to learn. I guess maybe that's a better way of putting it. I didn't have time to take this to my sister. She's got the maker to have her cut it, so I just freehand drew in bubble letters the spring, and then I cut it out. I thought I could pick up the alphabet at our Dollar Tree just already with vinyl, and they didn't have it, and then I didn't have the stick-on permanent vinyl in white. It hadn't come in. I ordered it from Cricut, but it hadn't come in when I was doing this, so I just used felt and I hot glued it. So again, it just goes to show you that sometimes if you don't have the machines, you can still use things freehand and have them look nice. And so what I did was I measured out how big I wanted the letters, so that way they would be somewhat the same size. So I just went and I put little dots to see where they needed to end, and then a line in the middle so I could make sure that, again, the letters were fairly straight. And then I just cut them out with scissors. I used hot glue to apply the felt to the blocks, and that's all there was to this project. Well, almost, because this is the point where I realized that I was missing a letter because I didn't have a letter for a block for one of the letters. So I thought, well, I must have cut out enough. And I was looking to see if I maybe was drawing it in a different spot, and I didn't see it, but I never made an extra letter. So this is when I went back and cut out another block and painted it again. And then I applied the burlap and the letters to that as well. For the very last DIY, I'm using this little frame from the Dollar Tree, and I am taking the word sarcasm off. I was trying to save it, but it's more, I thought it was kind of like a metal piece, but it's more like a just metallic paper. So I just remove it with, I was trying to with an X-Acto knife, but then I wind up using a little scraper to get it off. And it does leave a little bit on there and makes it a little bit rougher, but because I'm going to be distressing it, it's not a problem. So I wind up painting over the inside in that chalked Rust-Oleum chalk linen white paint. I will be distressing this as well with the black, so I'm not too, like I said, I'm not too concerned about covering the little parts where it came off, I just apply more paint there just to get it to be a bit more covered, but it's just giving the illusion of it not being smooth, so I'm okay with that. So my distressing is again using that black acrylic paint and just dry brushing it on. I always try to go in the same direction, but because this had corners, I kind of went into the corners the opposite direction, but it turned out really nice. And I did the same for the frame part around, just added a little bit of black to distress it. It was just kind of too shiny. Now I use my Cricut to put this word spring in, to cut out the word spring. I use skinny font, and then I just found a free flower on Pixabay that I could use for, instead of an eye, I put the flower. And I am just applying this to the frame using my transfer paper. I'm being very careful. I don't know why I didn't cut a big enough piece, but I didn't. So I'm just applying it here. I didn't want the letters to be all the same height, so even when I welded them one up, one down. And then I apply it there, and that's all there is to this last DIY. I really like the way this turned out, and all of these will look so cute either on my tray or on my fireplace in the case of that other spring sign that I made. So here's the final piece. I will be using this pickup truck with the Happy Easter, this welcome sign, as well as some floral picks, which I'll show you later. And one thing that is not from the Dollar Tree is this paint stir stick, but you could always use the little garden picks that they have if you don't have a paint stir stick. So what I'm going to start off with is by taking apart the truck. I will not be using the Happy Easter sign, so I'll save that for later. I might use it in a different project. And I'm going to be cutting off the part with the eggs. So I'm just left with the truck on its own. Now to cut off the egg part, I do use an X-Acto knife, and then I make my slits on each side, and then I just cut off the excess. You might have to sand down a little bit. I am going to be sanding the tires and all of the glittery parts, as I don't want them to be showing quite so much. I was going to keep the color and just kind of go over top of it lightly, but I wind up having to do a little bit more just because when I sand some of the glitter off, it takes a lot of the paint off, so I had to do a little bit more than I thought I would, but that's okay. I still wanted it to be pink, even though pink is kind of a Valentine's Day color, but it's also an Easter color, spring color. You see those muted pinks all the time, even for Easter decor. So I thought it would still be okay. I'm using a little bit of putty to close in the little hole at the top, just so you can't see it so much. It doesn't fill it in completely, but it does the job so it's not so noticeable. Once that has had time to dry, I go ahead and I paint it using the Cotton Candy Pink acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree, and it's just a really light pastel pink color, and like I said, I go over top of the whole truck with this pink color. I am only doing one coat of this paint because I do want it to have that rustic farmhouse look, so I'm going to be distressing it, so I didn't really need it to be covered completely and uniformly like you would if you wanted just one set color and weren't distressing it. I was going to keep the pink in the tires, but when I was going around it in the pink color, I wasn't getting a nice even coverage, meaning that my brush was my hands were shaky, I guess. And it was looking a little bit messy, so I thought I'd just do the whole tire black and I avoid all of that mess. And then after I paint the tires, I go ahead and distress it with the black color. I'm just using an acrylic black acrylic paint again from the Dollar Tree. And for distressing it, I'm just kind of dry brushing the black on. I apply a little bit to the brush, and then I dab it off, and then I also go ahead and add some white in there so that I dip a little bit of white, dip a little bit of black, and it gives me kind of like a grayish blackish distressed color. Once that is done, I take apart the little windmill, that sign with the welcome, and all I'm doing is I'm taking the welcome off, and I wanted to keep a part of the base of the windmill, and I thought I could just easily remove this, but it was quite glued on there quite well, so I wasn't able to do it that way. So I just wound up using some wire cutters, and I just cut it off at as close as I could to the welcome sign part. After that, I paint the base of the truck part, the little part where I'm going to have the truck sit on. I paint it in black, and then I just add a little bit of the pink and white as a distress over top of that. So kind of I do the opposite of what I did with the truck. And this is where I'm going to be gluing my truck down. If you wanted to, you could also use the Happy Easter sign part from the truck as your base. I decided to keep that for something else in case I wanted to have a Happy Easter sign that was that wide, but you can also use that for your base, and then that way you don't have to buy anything else. I am just using some hot glue to attach the truck. And I wind up putting a few of those little cubes from the Dollar Tree, the little wood square cubes, just for something to have the truck lean against and not fall down. Now, I did use a little bit of the wood glue and hot glue combination so that it sticks, but I'm not sure because of the curve of the tires how much of the wood glue actually got on there, but I made sure my high heat gun was really, really warm and it worked okay. You'll see that I kind of had to adjust it a few times, but it did the trick, and it's standing up now. It hasn't fallen over or anything like that. So what you see me doing here is I'm just touching up the little spots where I missed, or if because of the glue it took some of it off just because I was taking it on and off. So I'm just kind of touching everything up, and once I kind of stand it up, I see if I need to add any more paint. But this is what it looks like from the back. And then here I'm going to be hot gluing the windmill. Now, just because of the shape of it and everything, it's a little bit raised, so it doesn't stick well with the hot glue. So I wind up just putting a little piece of wood over top of it. You could use a popsicle stick. I had a piece of one of those garden picks that I just put over top of it just so it holds it in place. After I do that, I had these flower picks from the Dollar Tree. They're just white with a little bit of green that I'm attaching. I kind of attach some to the piece of wood and some in between just to get them to stick. I use the leaf part for the ones where I'm not sticking it inside, or like underneath the wood part, and I just attach them by the leaf, and then I add more as needed. I just used one pick and I didn't even use all of the branches from it. I cut it apart. And then I go ahead, and I should have done this before I add more of these little wood squares because I thought the truck needed a little bit more stability. And then I also should have done this before I add fresh flowers onto the truck. I just have a little stencil that I got as a part of like a kit with some chalkboard markers. So I just put fresh flowers, and that's it. After I go over top of the fresh flowers with my Sharpie, and I'm just using a black Sharpie. If you have a Cricut, you could cut out the fresh flowers. I have a Cricut, but I decided that I wanted to do this, and I always try to show you guys different things that you can use if you don't have these machines, or if you're not good at freehand writing, what sorts of things you can use that are inexpensive and usually readily available at the Dollar Tree. And then I just go over top of everything again and distress it a little bit more with the white black combination, just to make sure that everything blends in, including the farm fresh, not farm fresh, the fresh flowers that I wrote on there. And if you've watched my videos before, you know that I like to use a baby wipe to just blend all of the colors together, and that's what I do at the end here. I'm using this wall vase from the Dollar Tree. This is another simple DIY. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and taken off the sticker. The glue was really on there. I even bought this little thing from the Dollar Tree that's supposed to help remove the gunk, kind of like Goo Gone type of thing or whatever. I really do need Goo Gone, but I keep on forgetting to buy it when I'm out at the store. So what I'm doing is just sanding it down as much as I can, and I'm also going to sand the entire piece just to get it really scuffed up, because I'm going to be antiquing this little piece so it's not so shiny. I saw this idea from several people on YouTube and on Pinterest, and I thought it was amazing. There was all sorts of different ideas, but I kind of did my own. So what I'm doing is just soaking some paper towel in vinegar after I sanded. The sanding piece is very important, so you have to sand it and scuff it up really well. And then I'm going to be adding these paper towels to the piece and letting it sit there for a half an hour. Now I wound up doing that, and then I wound up actually putting the back of the piece into a aluminum bin that I filled with vinegar to give it even more. So I probably let it soak a total of about an hour and a half in vinegar with a combination of paper towels and it sitting in a bath of vinegar. Now, if you're doing the paper towel method, you're not like submerging everything in the vinegar. You have to come back every few minutes and re-soak the paper towels. Otherwise, they'll dry out and it won't work. So I probably went every 10 minutes to go and soak them, and then went for the first half an hour, and then for the next, I think it was like 45 minutes around there, I wound up just submerging it and then pouring more vinegar over top, and I did not go back. I just left it to sit there. So here is what it looks like after I removed the paper towels. It's nice and aged and I love it. It looks so antiqued. And it was so easy to do. It took a little bit of time, but really, really easy to do. And then I'm going to add these floral picks from the Dollar Tree. I think I used 4 different branches. And I put some floral foam into the wall vase so that I could stick the picks in there, and I just do it so these long ones with the white so that they kind of hang at the bottom, and then the other ones I just put in. Really, this is to your taste. You can put lavender in there if you have it. I just did another project with lavender, so I didn't want to add lavender in there, but you can put anything you want in there. And I really like this because I'll be able to use it in the summer, in the fall, and for Christmas too, because the vase itself is versatile, and then you just change out the floral picks. I do take apart the floral picks too, so I don't wind up using quite all 4 of them, but take them apart, make them fit however you want. They don't need to be in the bunch that came in from the store. Don't be afraid to do that. And you don't need to throw them out. If you cut it too short, you can use it for a different project. And that's all there is to this DIY. Really, really simple, very inexpensive, cost me under $5, and it looks beautiful. I'm going to be painting out this galvanized steel planter, again from the Dollar Tree. Although I think it's cute and I thought about aging this one as well, I thought I'd show you something a little bit different. It's still going to be distressed, it's still going to be antiqued, but a little bit differently. So I'm going to be using my Rust-Oleum chalked linen white paint to paint over this, and I do 2 coats of it. Not too heavy of coats, but enough to cover it so that it's not showing the steel too much. So after that dries, what I do is I take a baby wipe and I remove some of the paint from the letters, and I'm doing this to make it look even more rustic. I will be going over it with black, but I want it to look even more rustic, so I'm doing this just by removing some of the paint from the letters, and it'll bring out the darker color from beneath. And then I make sure that all of my colors are unified. So I took off a glob of paint with a baby wipe. And then I add black acrylic paint to the top and the bottom using that baby wipe to wipe off excess paint. And then I dry brush all around the container to make it look even more distressed. And that's it for the paint part. As you can see, I painted a little bit on the inside, but not all the way. And it's just that if I put something else in there so that the silver or the steel doesn't show through, but I didn't need to waste paint all the way down because I will never have it empty. And then I'm going to stuff it. Now, here's where I kind of made a bit of a mistake. I did not have enough fluorofoam to put fluorofoam down, so I thought I could just do a little bit of just brown paper and this egg carton. I always use egg carton. It's kind of a stuffing. And then I thought I could just poke the tulips in there, but unfortunately, they weren't staying up straight, so I had to use a little bit of fluorofoam that I had. I just didn't have enough to do the whole thing, so I just kind of played around with it. And then what I wound up doing is I put a skewer into the bottom of the tulips, and then I wound up hot gluing it inside and poking through little pieces of fluorofoam, and that helped it stay. But before I did that, I decided I wanted to put legs on this, and I just took a cork and I cut it in half, 2 corks, and I cut them in half, painted them white, and hot glued them to the bottom, just to give little feet to this container. And I'm stuffing the container also with some floral moss. I really wanted the bulbs to show. That's why I didn't hot glue them down, because I could have just hot glued them down and it would have been fine, but I wanted the bulbs to show, so that's why I went the skewer route. But if you do go the skewer route, I suggest you put a full piece of fluorofoam in the bottom, like have it in there nice and snug so it doesn't move. If you have to put extra, you put extra. And then put the piece of piece of skewer into the bottom of the bulb and have it be long enough that the bulb can stay at the top and the part is skewered in, like stuffed into the fluorofoam, and then put your moss over top. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave me a comment and I'll explain better. So that's all there is to it. It was a really easy DIY, again, inexpensive. I actually got these tulips last year at the end of the season, so they were 50% off. So great DIY, and I love, it's very spring-like to me. So here's what it looks like all finished. And again, this container you can use all year round, which is great. My supplies, most of my supplies from the Dollar Tree. I got all of these springtime flowers or there for $1.25. I am in Canada, so it's $1.25, not $1. So you can see I had some darker and lighter lavender, as well as these lovely spring flowers that have some yellow and some pink and some purple in them. The only thing that I did not get from the Dollar Tree is my actual wreath part where I'll be attaching all of these springs to. That I wound up actually getting from Facebook Marketplace from a lady who was selling a whole bunch of these for just under $1 each. What I'm actually doing is I'm going to be attaching the springs to the wreath diagonally. I've had to cut the stems down a little bit because they were just too long and unflexible. I couldn't really do what I wanted to do with them, and I'm going to be kind of stacking them side by side, but as you can see, I've cut them quite a bit off, and I've separated them, and then I will be attaching them with some floral wire. As you can see, I've done that here. Um, and some of it will be showing, as you can see, but I'm going to be cutting that off after. So for now it'll work. I just need to make sure that they're on tight. So what I've done is I've also bundled them together, which I found was a little bit easier than trying to do one by one. I did do one by one to like to fill in the spaces where they needed to be filled in, but for the most part I bundled them. And so what I'm doing is using this piece of cardboard, and I've cut these rulers in half, and I'm going to be making a little frame out of the rulers, and I'm just going to use the cardboard as a back for my little sign. I cut the rulers with a power saw. I was going to use my hand saw, but it was too hard, so I just used the power saw, and I'm just hot gluing them together. And once I hot glue them, I also stain them in the same glaze that I was using for the other project. It's the Rust-Oleum glaze in Java, and it's just to give them a little bit of a darker finish. Than they're kind of like orangey right now, so I just want a little bit of a darker finish to them. If you guys haven't been to my channel before, thank you so much for stopping by. My name is Vesna, and this is my DIY channel where I try to create beautiful home decor DIYs on a budget. So if you could like that kind of stuff, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and hit the notification bell so that you can see new videos. And make sure you tell me you've subscribed in the comments below. So then I use the little frame to measure out how big I need this cardboard to be, and I just use an X-Acto knife to cut it. So once I have it all cut out, I use my Rust-Oleum chalk linen white paint to paint out the cardboard white. You don't have to use cardboard. If you have cardstock, that's white, you could use that. And you don't have to use chalk paint, you can use acrylic paint. I just had chalk. I have this big thing of chalk paint, so I always use it for most of my projects. White has been hard to find in the Dollar Tree lately, so I've been using the white acrylic paint, and I find that sometimes it doesn't cover as well as this chalk paint, and it's a little bit shinier. I do 2 coats of the white, and I just use my hairdryer to dry in between, and then I hot glue the frame to the cardboard, and then I dry brush a makeshift purple color on to the piece as well. For the colors to dry brush, I'm using some of this blue acrylic paint and the fuchsia pink acrylic paint, and it's mostly because I didn't have purple acrylic paint. So I mix these 2 colors together, and then I dab my paintbrush and I dab off the excess and just lightly dry brush this color onto the back just to give it a little bit more of a spring feel. While that's drying, I use my Cricut to cut out the word bloom. I'm using the Easy November font, and I use that for the home sign as well. And then I am going to again attach it to the sign. It's a permanent vinyl, so it has the sticking at the back, so I don't have to hot glue it or glue it or Mod Podge it or anything like that. For the first flip, I am using this metal sunflower vase from one of our local thrift stores, and I'm going to be sanding down the farmhouse sunflowers or farm fresh sunflowers, that little sign. Although I didn't mind the color and I didn't mind the sunflowers, it just didn't really fit in with my decor, so I'm going to be making it a little bit different. I'm going to save that little leaf that's up there, and like I said, I'll just sand it down so that way you can't see it, and that's all that in terms of prep work, that's all I'm doing. Once I sand it down and rough it up, I'm going to be painting it, and I'm using the Serenity Blue from Rust-Oleum chalked paint. It's similar to the Duck Egg Blue from Annie Sloan if you've tried Annie Sloan paint. I really like it. It's kind of like a grayish light blue. I really love this color. I painted my island in this color in the Duck Egg Blue, but I painted my island in that color. I painted another entertainment unit in that color mixed with a little bit of white. It's kind of like a mix of it. I love this color a lot. So I'm just going to do one full coat of coverage, and then I just go back and I touch it up just slightly if there's any of the green showing through. The touch-ups were minimal. I just did a little bit where, if I smudged with my finger or something like that, because I didn't mind a little bit of the green coming through because I will be distressing it. So you'll see that in the next clip. To distress this, I used several colors. I was going to use my liquid gilding copper, but it finally became too old and dried out on me, so I didn't get much out from there. So then I wound up using a little bit of the gold metallic, silver metallic, black, and cashmere paints. I kind of mixed them together and did a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then that helped me achieve. I wanted it to look like there was like a blackish tarnished metal peeling off. That's what I wanted to look on the this little vase, and I really think I achieved it. Some spots were a little bit too dark, so I did go over with the blue again, but I did that purposely because the sign that I did put on it, I wanted to go over it with blue, so it was okay. It just kind of dulled down the distressed parts. So I remember when I first started distressing things, and I was always worried, well, what if I do it too much, or what if I don't like it? The beauty of paint, and I say this in every video, is that you can just go over it with your other paint. It's not permanent. Sharpie is a little bit harder to go over with, but it's still possible. So it's not the end of the world unless you don't have the paint anymore. But the way you get it to look the way you want is just by playing around with it. At least for me, there's no set rule. Well, I do 3 strokes this way and 4 strokes this way. I don't. I kind of put it on, push it away from me a little bit, look at it from further away, and then if I think it needs more, I add more. If it needs less, then I always dull it down with the paint that I started with. Again, it's trial and error. The more you do it, the better at it you get. And I've found this technique of using baby wipes to kind of blend some of the paints together. So that's what I'm doing here. And as you can see, it's turning out really nice. And again, dulling down that black so it's not so black. And then I did put that cashmere into a separate container just so that I could get a little bit more, or sorry, not the cashmere, the metallic gold, just so I could get that out a little bit more. And like I said, it's trial and error. And if you don't want to do it on the project that you're doing, you could always do it on just a piece of wood or something like that, just to see, okay, is that the color that I want to do, if you don't want to have the extra work of going back over it. So I went ahead and I created this flowers and garden sign lettering actually from with my Cricut. If you can find these letters at the Dollar Tree, you don't need a Cricut, but you do need something to have like a little bit of a bump on it. You don't want to, I didn't want to use this as a stencil. I wanted it to be actually the vinyl on the vase. So if you can find vinyl letters, or if you're brave enough to cut them out yourself, you could do that or use your Cricut. I thought I was going to do this shape around as well, and you'll see that I'm painting over it so you wouldn't see the black, but then when I put the flowers in garden, I didn't like the way it looked, so I wound up taking it off. So then I just used transfer tape to apply it to my vase. This video is a part of a challenge hosted by Jamie over at Border Bananas, and it's her Flippin' Friday challenge, which she has every month, where she challenges us to find something from the thrift store and make it over and make it look beautiful again, or make it completely different. Whatever you decide, that's your choice. And like I said, she hosts this every month. Please check her out. I'll have her information linked below. I'll have the playlist linked below as well. The playlists have been a little bit wonky, so you may have to use a computer to see the playlist. I think there has been some issues with them. I'm not sure, but everything will be linked below, so check everybody out. And there's going to be lots of creators, so check them out as well. Back to the video. So as you can see, I've applied the flowers and garden here, and now I'm just kind of taking a look. I'm seeing that the F goes too far, so I was going to cut it down, and then when I cut it down, I decided that I really didn't like the way it looked, so then I just wound up removing it eventually. And like I said, all of this is trial and error. If paint had come off when I was removing it, I would have touched it up. I'm not ever afraid to touch anything up or to fix something, because paint is amazing to work with, and any kind of chalk paint is very forgiving and really easy to work with. If you haven't tried it, I really do recommend that you try. I love the Rust-Oleum chalk linen paint. It's easier to get. I love Annie Sloan too, but it's a little bit more difficult to get depending, I guess, where you are. At least where we are here, it's a little bit more difficult. So then when I remove that, I decide that I need to go over it, and I knew I would be going over it with the blue. So again, I do my method of applying the blue paint and then removing it off with a wipe. Now this time this wipe was a little bit dry. It wasn't completely wet, so it didn't take everything off, but it just gave me the look that I was going for. So once I got the coverage I was looking for, I then went ahead and just put some flower picks. These I believe I bought off of AliExpress a few years ago. They're just roses, and I think they're very cute, so I've popped them in here, and here's what it looks like all finished. So for this next DIY, or thrift flip actually, I'm using this hurricane vase. Like I said, I got it for 50 cents from a thrift store. You can pick them up at the Dollar Tree for $1.25, at least here in Canada, or $1 in the States. But I saw this and I do tons of stuff with them. I had a whole bunch left over from my wedding. I had used them up before, but I still love doing projects with them. And especially because they're glass, so you can actually put fresh flowers in there if you wanted to, which is nice without worrying that they're going to stain your table or leak or anything like that. So this is a super easy thrift flip. I am adding jute rope to this vase, and I am using hot glue to apply it and just going around in circles. I'm not cutting it off. I'm just using one string of rope, jute rope, for the whole vase, and I put it about 3/4 of the way up. So that's all there is to this DIY. Like I said, it was really easy and it cost me under $2 because I didn't use a whole roll of jute rope and I didn't use a whole lot of glue. I think maybe it was 2 glue sticks and they come in a package of, I don't know, 8, I think. So it's very inexpensive and I think it's a beautiful vase. Very farmhouse, kind of rustic. Turned out great. You can put fresh flowers. I chose to put Dollar Tree picks. I had 2 of them on hand. So I guess it cost me a little bit more. I guess it cost me $4 because I used the picks, but you can use flowers from your garden. You can use branches. You can use anything in here. And I just put them in there, and that's all there was to this DIY, and I think it turned out beautifully. So what I'm doing is I have this galvanized pot that I bought at the thrift store for $2, and I am going to be making it a little bit more galvanized rustic looking. And I do this just by combining some colors. Now this pot is from Dollarama, so I think it was $4. So you can get it brand new if you don't find it at the thrift store. You can also find them without the little ropes, and I think those ones are even cheaper, but I came across this. It was $2. It wasn't too bad, and it already had the jute rope, so I loved it. So I'm combining a few colors. I'm combining dark blue, black, gray, and white. And I'm just dabbing colors as I go. And this is how I've made plenty of galvanized look type of pots. So I can link one of the most recent ones. I believe it's a Christmas one that I did up at the top, and you can check that out. There's also a Valentine's Day one where I made wood look like galvanized steel, so check that out. I'll link the 2 videos up here. And once I do that and get the look that I'm going for, I just assemble the flowers in it, and that's my dupe. Now, for the flowers, I did get these on Amazon, and these lamb's ears. So they were the most expensive part of my project. I believe I got 4 stems for about $13, so it's a little bit more than I would spend. But the stems were, so this is from one stem. These two little stems are from one stem. So the stems went quite a long way. And then I'm just adding these lavender bits um, from Dollar Tree. Now, as you can see, some of them I've already used for other projects. So I would say there's about $3 worth of floral in here, plus maybe another $2 for the lamb's ears. So you're looking at about $5 for the floral and $2 for the basket. So it's about $7. A little bit, like I said, it's not cheap, as inexpensive as the other one, but still fairly inexpensive, especially compared to the dupe, which was quite a bit more. So here is the dupe. And like I said, I think mine is pretty close. So it costs $24.99. Again, that's American, and I'm talking about Canadian dollars. And that's what the dupe looks like. And here's my completed arrangement. I think I am pretty close to what Kirkland's made. First DIY was inspired by Kimspired DIY. I found this pin a little while ago and I thought it was a perfect small spring theme DIY. So I'm going to be using some Dollar Tree materials as well as the Rust-Oleum glaze in Java. Sorry, I can't seem to spit that out. And I'll start off with these garden picks. I'm actually only needing 3 of these garden picks. I'm going to be cutting them in half, and I will be cutting the tops of them off as well. And to cut them, I just have a hand miter cutter. So I just use that, and you just have to kind of push on one side and then on the other, and it cuts it off. And then I will be attaching them with some hot glue and a jumbo craft stick. I really like this DIY because it is a really simple Dollar Tree DIY. It's quick and you can make it spring themed, you can make it Easter themed, you can make it Christmas, fall, whichever. So for today, I'm making it spring themed, but it's very versatile. So if you wanted to make it, you could make it any way that you wanted it to fit the season or your decor style. Once I've glued it down to attach all the pieces, I also add the little triangles that were left over just to attach it at the top. And then I go ahead and I stain it using that Rust-Oleum glaze. And I love this to stain. It dries really quick. It's not that messy, and it has a beautiful rustic farmhousey color. I just use a rag to apply this stain or the glaze, and it's the beauty of it is you can wipe off the excess and you can add more if you wanted it a little bit darker, so it's really easy to work with. So I set that off to the side, and then I go ahead and I use my basket, and I'm going to be attaching the basket to the piece, but first I want to make it kind of go together with the backing, so I'm just adding a little bit of jute rope to this basket. I'm doing it around and in the middle, like I said, just to kind of tie everything together. Once I finish attaching the jute rope, I go ahead and see how I want this to look when I attach it to the back, and I just use hot glue to attach it. And then I will be filling this little basket with some florals. But before I go ahead and do that, I've cut out using my Cricut the word home, and I'm going to be attaching it. I just cut it out on some white vinyl, and I'm going to just be sticking it on there. The vinyl has a sticky back, so because it's a permanent vinyl, so I'm just attaching it to the sign right there, kind of in the middle. I didn't measure, I just eyeballed it, and that's all there is to that. Then the florals that I'm adding in here, you can add anything you want, like I said. These are all from the Dollar Tree, and I used 3 picks in total. So, $3. It didn't cost too much, and I just put a little bit of floral foam at the bottom. You can also put some moss. I did not attach moss. The picture, the inspiration does have moss in it, but I decided not to attach it because sometimes it gets a little bit messy. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to hang this or not, so I do attach some jute rope for it to be hung. I might put it on my tray or I might hang it. I have a home sign that I have hung up in my kitchen where I can replace the O with this basket. That might work too. I haven't decided where I'll put it, so I wanted that option, and because I thought it might droop, even if I put it in my tray, I could have the florals droop over, so I'm adding some of these droopy ones. So just before I show you my finished piece, here's the inspiration and here's my finished piece. So it's a little bit different, but I think it's very much close to the inspiration. Next DIY will also go on my tray. This is really easy. This is a piece of, it's a tube from those bracelets that glow in the dark that you can pick up at the Dollar Tree. And I just saved the tube, and it has a lid on it too, so both ends are closed. And then I use this little piece of wood. It looks like a dowel, but it's actually from one of the sponge brushes from the Dollar Tree that the brush it was done. So I cut this in half, and I use this as the handles for my rolling pin. I had ripped off well, actually, it wasn't even I ripped it off, but it had like the cellophane kind of label, so I just took that off, and it was white underneath, so I didn't need to paint over it. I used hot glue to attach the handles, and then I dry brushed some of that black acrylic paint around it, and then I wrote the word spring on it, and that's all there is to it. Didn't attach the handle properly on one side, so I did wind up having to just re-hot glue it, and I just made sure that the end was nice and clean. I think that was the problem last time, but I reattached the hot glue, or my hot glue wasn't hot enough. I did pick up hot glue at the Dollar Tree this time around before I ordered it from Amazon, but I think this Dollar Tree hot glue is not as good as the Amazon one, so I picked up a lot of them, so I'll have to, once I go through them, I will pay a little bit more for glue so that it works a bit better. And again, I just freehand write the word spring. I'm sorry it's out of frame a little bit. I'm using a Sharpie to write this word in. So that's the finished piece. I think it turned out cute, and it'll make a nice little tray decor. Now you'll notice that I did move it a little bit more to the left side, and that's because my trays are a little bit deeper, so I can kind of prop it up a little bit, but then that way I'm not hiding the word spring on it. So this DIY, like an improvement on something that was pretty nice to start with. So I had these clovers from a St. Patrick's Day sign that I repurposed for my noodle board, which I can link up here. And I'm just going to be antiquing them. So what I did was I let them sit for 24 hours in a vinegar bath. So just some vinegar in a aluminum pan, and I just left them in there so that they would get nice and aged. So as you can see, they got a little bit rusty, which is the look that I was going for. So I didn't bother taking the glue off the back because I'm going to be gluing it back onto something. I just wanted it to look a little bit aged, which is what I got. So for the next decoration, I'm using some trash items. So I'm using this jar. I think it was a salsa jar. And I tried to take off as much as I could of the glue, but I keep on forgetting to buy glue gun. So I took off a little bit, not all of it. So you can see there's quite a bit left, but it didn't matter because I'm going to be painting it out white and I'm going to be covering that part anyway, so you won't be able to see it. I'm all about saving time, so if I don't have to take off the gunk and it's going to take me too long, I won't do it. You don't need to because I'll be covering it up so you won't be able to see it. I'm only doing one coat of the white and I'm using the Rust-Oleum Chalk Linen White paint, and I'm doing a nice coat of it all around the jar. I'm even putting it under the part that'll be covered. I still wanted it to be covered. It just did need to be smooth. And I will be aging this as well, distressing it. So again, I'm not doing two coats because I will be distressing it, so I want all of those colors to show underneath. Once that is done, I go ahead and I attach some burlap around the jar, and I'm just using the burlap ribbon that you can get at the Dollar Tree or Dollarama, and I'm hot gluing it all around the jar. After I hot glue the burlap, then I hot glue one of those Lucky Charms that I aged in the previous decor piece and go ahead and distress the jar. And I'm distressing it with some of this green that you can see, and that green is the forest green or leaf green from acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree, as well as some black acrylic paint. Then I just add these green floral picks from the Dollar Tree into the jar, and that's all there is to this DIY. For this next DIY, I purchased this clover from the Dollar Tree. It's not too bad at the one at the back, like at the front as well, but I didn't want to use that side. I had seen an image on Pinterest of what looked kind of like a palette clover. So that's what I'm going to be trying to recreate with this one. So I'm using this as my base, and I have these strips of cardboard that I cut that I'm going to be hot gluing onto this clover and painting out. Now what I'm doing is I'm just cutting them into different shapes so that way it looks like it's stacked palette wood. It's not all one size. One is smaller, one is bigger, so it just kind of looks like a staggered pattern. So after I attach all of the pieces, then I use an X-Acto knife and scissors just to cut off the excess so that it's the same shape as the clover. So I picked up several different colors for my spring and Easter and summer DIYs. So I'm using, as you saw before, the leaf green, forest green. Those are my darker greens, and then the lime green and neon green, as well as white acrylic paint. And I'll just be mixing them as I go to until I achieve the look that I'm going for. I wanted to look a little bit aged and dull. Once I achieve the amount of green that I'm going for, I let it dry and then I just distress it further with a little bit of espresso brown paint, acrylic paint, and I just lightly almost dry brush on some of this brown just all over the piece in spots where I think it needs to look a little bit more aged. This next piece is a trash to treasure piece, and I'm going to be using a scrap piece of cardboard as well as one of these clovers, but I'm only using this clover to trace around to trace it around so that way I can paint in a clover. So I'll just be using it as my trace. I mean, I could have probably flipped it over and glued the one side and then just painted the one side, but I wanted to stencil it in and draw it on. So I'm going to do that on this piece of cardboard, and then I'm going to put these picks around the cardboard to make it look like a picture frame. But before I do any of that, I will be painting it out in the warm white and white from acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree. So I just do a light coat of the white and I want the brown from the cardboard to stick out from underneath. And then I frame around the piece with these little wooden picks, the garden picks from the Dollar Tree. And then I also use some cardboard left over from the other project for the top part of it. And I did this for two reasons. I didn't want to cut up two more sticks because the other pieces of the stick weren't long enough. So I wanted it to be over top to overlap these. So I needed a little bit longer, so I didn't want to cut them up. And then I also wanted to finish using up these strips that I had cut up. And I'm just using some hot glue to attach these. And then I go over top of the frame with the warm acrylic white paint. Once that dries, I go ahead and I trace the clover in there and I paint it out in a mixture of that forest green and leaf green that I had used for the previous project. After that is all done and dry, I realized I need a little bit more and I just dry brush around the frame in black acrylic paint. That is all there is to this project. This next DIY is kind of a trash to treasure. I'm reusing some of my spring blocks that I had up for my spring decor because I will be switching to Easter now. I'm not using that anymore. And I am going to paint these out just in the white acrylic paint. And I will be using my Cricut to cut out the letters to spell lucky, so it looks like Scrabble letters. So for the letters, I'm just using a green permanent vinyl, and I've cut them out, and then I will freehand draw the numbers for, like, because I'm wanting it to look like Scrabble. And I always use transfer paper to transfer anything, even if it seems like should be easy to transfer these letters. The vinyl stretches, so if you don't use transfer paper, it can get all, the shape can be all mixed up. After I attach the letters, I just dry brush everything in a black acrylic paint and then use a green Sharpie to write in the numbers. I also use a little bit of brown acrylic paint. And again, I just dry brush everything on, and here is what it turned out like. Because I had written out the word spring in these blocks, I had one more letter left, and I painted this out white as well, and I just put the number 17 using that same vinyl and the same method of distressing. And I did this because March 17th is St. Patrick's Day, so it's just another decor piece to put into my tray. For this one, I also added a little bit of that mixture of the green paints for the distressing, just to make it a little bit brighter. So this next piece is another trash to treasure. I always save all the scrap pieces of wood anytime we're building something or I'm making signs or anything like that. Even if it's a small piece like this, I save it because I figure I could always use it in tray decor. So I had this piece left over that I painted white using my chalked linen white paint. And I'm just going to be attaching one of these clovers that I antiqued onto the piece with some hot glue, and I'll be distressing this piece as well with a black acrylic paint, kind of like I did everything else. So there's a theme to this. As you can see, I'm distressing everything in black, green, and brown, sometimes black on its own, sometimes brown and black, and sometimes brown, black, and green, and then just attaching this piece to it, and that's it. Very simple, but really cute. And I'm moving it up to the top a little bit more because I have 3 different trays. Some of them have like a little plate part where it goes in deeper, so this way you could see it and I don't have to raise it. So here it is. So this last DIY is a little bit of both. It's Dollar Tree and Trash to Treasure. So I'm using a soy sauce bottle, as well as this little hat from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to be taking off all of the pieces from the hat to leave me with just the frame or skeleton of the hat. And then I'm going to be wrapping it around with one of the scarves that I had gotten from the Dollar Tree. I wound up just taking it apart a little bit because I needed it to fit on the bottle. So I wanted that little base part to be a little bit wider so that the bottle could fit on it, so it wouldn't be too high. And this little scarf, like I said, I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just wrapping it around because I think it's a nicer St. Patrick's Day color and pattern than the shiny green. So I wrap both the top and part of the hat and hot glue the material to the plastic. I don't glue them together until I actually put them on the bottle, just so I can get them to fit the way I want them to. And then I add a little beard to this guy to make him a gnome. The beard is fur ribbon, fur, yeah, fur ribbon that I got from either the Dollar Tree or Dollarama. I'm not sure which one I got it from. And I just cut it into strips so I can make a nice brown beard for him. I just hot glue it to the bottle, and then I hot glue for the nose a little, it's actually like a little piece of birch. It came in a pack from the Dollar Tree, these little mini birch logs. So I hot glue that as his nose, and I make little feet using a leftover cardboard, and I wrap them in this fabric as well. I don't wrap the whole foot in the fabric, I just wrap about half the foot in there, and then I glue it to the bottom of the bottle, and I snip down his beard just a touch, so because it was a little bit too long, and that's all there is to it. Here's what he looks like. I think he's so cute. And so here's everything displayed on my St. Patty's Day tray. So I saw this truck on the Kirkland's website, and I thought it was really cute. It was about 15 bucks, I think. Regardless, we don't have a Kirkland's here, so to have it delivered to Canada and shipped and all of that stuff, even if I'm not even sure if they do shipping, but it would be quite expensive. So I thought, well, this sign would just do the trick. So the sign is from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just taking it apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand off the glitter, and I'm going to cut off the carrots and the bunny's butt. And then I'm going to wind up reusing everything. I'm just going to do it a little bit differently. I don't love that the paper ripped off the carrots, but I'll just wind up repainting them and cutting them out to just to look like a better shaped carrot. And I'm just using an X-Acto knife for all of this, and then I'm sanding and kind of cutting down all the parts that are loose and not looking the best. And like I said, I'll be reusing everything. I may wind up, when I was doing this, I thought I was going to wind up using all of the carrots, but I don't wind up using all of them, but I do save them for different projects just in case, because I always do that. So once I clean everything up, it's time to paint it. So I sand down a little bit more of the Happy Easter and the tires just to get the glitter off so I can paint over it. I wind up painting black over top of the tires and this Paradise Blue for the truck. So I'm keeping it pretty much blue like it was before. I'm just giving it a little bit more depth and color and kind of getting rid of the shininess because I really don't like the glitter. So just do a light coat over top of the truck in the blue, and then I wind up coloring the entire tire in black. Once the truck is all painted, I add some of the white acrylic paint just around the edges and the tires and kind of where the door would be. And I'm doing this because I want it, like I said, to have a little bit of more character than it did before and to look more farmhousey, rustic type of look to it. Once that's done, I go ahead and fix up the carrots and just touch up the bunny's butt. For the carrots, I'm adding this pumpkin orange, and I'm using it with a brush that has a little bit of brown on it that I didn't wash. So it gives it more of a darker kind of orange, not such a bright orange look, but more like a rustic aged orange or a burnt orange. And I'm just doing the paint over top of these carrots. And then I use the leaf green for the top. And for the bunnies, but I'm just painting it over with some white acrylic paint. Again, just to get rid of so much of that shininess and just to kind of mute some of the pink so it's not so in your face shiny and bright. Once that's all dry and ready to go, I attach my carrots to the pickup truck. I just hot glue them at the back, and I just dry brush a little bit of black over top of the truck and then wipe it off with a wet wipe. And this is just to give that truck a more of a dirty kind of rustic feel to it. I like the way it looked just blue, but I thought it was a little bit too new looking, so I thought the black would add a little bit more. I'm using my new glue gun, which I talked about in my previous video, which I can link here, and it's working really well. And I'm just using that to hot glue the carrots, and then I hot glue the bunny's bum at the end. And then I decided that instead, the Kirkland's dupe that I saw was it standing on its own, but I had done something like that with another spring DIY that I did. So this one I wanted it to hang on one of my doors. When you come into my house, I have two doors. One is to the bathroom, one is to the outside. So I wanted it on the bathroom door. So I just attached some jute rope to the back. So that's all there is to this guy. Really easy to do. Very inexpensive. It cost me $1.25 because I am in Canada and these things are $1.25 at the Dollar Tree, not $1. And here's the dupe. I think I nailed it. Like I said, it was a stand on its own, but I wanted it as a plaque, so that's the only difference. If you wanted to have this exact replica, you could easily use a paint stir stick at the bottom, paint it black, and attach this guy to that. But here it is, completed. Love the way it turned out. So this is a super easy one. I'm taking this package of eggs from the Dollar Tree, and it's a package of 6 eggs. I'm going to dump these eggs, and I'm going to spray paint the carton in just a black spray paint that I have on hand. I'm not going to record myself spray painting it, but just any old black paint will do. Then once it's spray painted, I just add a little bit of the cashmere tan acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree around. I just dry brush it lightly, and I glue in the eggs back and wait for it to all dry. Once all of that's done, I cut these little strips just from black construction paper, and I'm going to be having that as my banner around the eggs. And I'll use my Cricut to write in farm fresh eggs, 25 cents. And then I will be hot gluing that to the container as well, and I'll be adding some deer moss as well. And I just use the Cricut font, and for the Farm Fresh, I did about 1/2 inch tall, and then for the eggs I did about 0.6 tall, just a little bit bigger than the Farm Fresh, and the strips were about an inch wide and just long enough to cover the container. And I was really excited because I used the vinyl from the Dollar Tree. They finally got Cricut supplies. I was so excited to see them there. And I used the permanent white vinyl and it worked just fine. I did not use the transfer paper because I already had a pack going of the transfer paper from Amazon, so I will be using that next time. But this worked really well and it looks fine. And it looks great. It cut really nicely. I just used the vinyl setting. It didn't rip and it was a nice small font and it did a really great job. So I'm happy with it. And you can't beat the deal. I then used this glue gun to glue down the moss as well as the Farm Fresh. And I just wanted it to look like it was wrapped around, so I just glued it at the sides, and I did this for both, and then I just added moss in between, and that's all there is to this project. Really easy. It cost $1.25. I guess if you included the vinyl too, so $2.50. I'm in Canada, so everything is $1.25 at the Dollar Tree, although they've just raised prices to $1.50, which makes me a little bit sad for some things, but oh well. So really inexpensive to do, just need a little bit of paint and this egg carton container, and then you could even write these in if you didn't have a Cricut. I just wanted to use my new vinyl. And here it is, all completed. Love the way it turned out. I will be using it in my tray. And then for this DIY, I will be creating a little decoration, like a little egg basket decoration, using the sign from the Dollar Tree and a crate from the Dollar Tree. So what I'm doing is I'm taking apart the bunny. I am using an X-Acto knife to cut everything off. I'm cutting the head off, the arms off, and then I'll be reusing everything. Now, I tried using the X-Acto knife to cut on an angle, but it was a little bit too hard because I couldn't see from the back where to cut, and I couldn't push all the way through. I was afraid I'd break the knife. I already broke one. So I tried using the miter shears, which helped me get going, and then I just decided, you know what, I'll just cut it off straight up at the top, and then I'll just cut the little triangles out. So that's probably the easiest way. Maybe you have other tools that you can use that make it a little bit easier, but this is what I found to be the best for me with, limited amount of tools. So once that's all cut, I sand everything down just to get it to look nice and even, and then I sand off the Easter glitter as well as from the ears just to kind of make painting the ears a little bit easier, and then to make that Easter not be so shiny because I don't like the shiny look. I also wind up, after I sand everything down, I wind up painting over top of the Easter, just kind of dry brushing some white, which I'll show you. And then I do the wipe on wipe off thing that I always do with baby wipes, just to have it look a little bit more rustic. And for the paint, I am using the Rust-Oleum Chalk Linen White. I've said this in previous videos, I like to buy the big tub of it, the big paint can of it, and then it lasts me for a long time for a lot of projects. I've been doing YouTube videos for about a year, and I've been using that Rust-Oleum Chalk Linen White probably close to a year now, and this is my second paint can. But that being said, I painted 2 fireplaces with the first one, as well as a whole bunch of furniture. So it goes a really long way. It's a very good value. I paint the head in the white as well. And then I did bother with sanding down the nose. I was okay with it showing through a little bit because I'm going to be covering it with some burlap. So if you're ever wondering why there's like different projects that wind up kind of being in the camera view when I'm doing these, is because as they're drying, I might be doing projects for a different video. I try to craft either when my kids are sleeping, or I'll take like a Saturday morning, and that'll be kind of mom time where for about an hour or two I just craft. And it's great therapy for me, and it's a great way for me to get things that I've wanted to get done. But that's why sometimes you'll see different crafts that I haven't been using in my video, like those carrots, which will be for a video on Tuesday. So just kind of so you have an idea of why. It's not that I'm that messy, it's just that I'm kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff at once. And sometimes like I said, I'll be reusing it and I put it in so I can see it, and I forget to just move it over so you guys don't see it in the camera, but I have to have it like within hand, within reach, because I'll forget about it. And so then what I'm doing with the bunny's head, which you see me doing here, is I'm actually just dry brushing some brown and some of the cashmere and some black to make him look really aged and rustic. I just make a little triangle with the burlap, and then I stick it on the bunny. I wind up doing two burlaps just to make it a little bit raised, and then I draw in the eyes with a pencil first, and then with a Sharpie hot glue everything down. And then I wind up putting everything together. I did forget to put the whiskers on. I remember after, but for the whiskers I used some twine just to make them be a little bit curly, and I just measured so that they were all the same. And then to make him be like a little basket for eggs, I attach this crate from the Dollar Tree. It's the smaller one. They have two, ones that have handles, ones that don't. This is the smaller version. And what I'm doing is just kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to set this guy in. I wind up giving the crate some legs, and then I also glue a little bit at the bottom of the head to make it a little bit raised. I thought I could get away without doing this, but he didn't look right, and then I was afraid it wouldn't stand if I did it any other way, so this is what I wound up doing. For the legs, I'm using just the tumble blocks, 4 of them. I'm going to paint them in white and hot glue them to the bottom of the crate. I'll also paint the sides of the crate in white, so because you wind up seeing that. And then I just kind of assemble everything. Once everything is attached, I put the eggs. I'm using the small carton of eggs from the Dollar Tree again, the 6 eggs. And I put little sticks on them. And this is from skewers. I just cut them in half. And then I put floral foam in the bottom of the crate so that way the eggs can stay. I don't have to glue them or anything. I just kind of push them through and they're a little bit raised and it looks like the bunny is holding the eggs. And then I attach the arms and the feet also, which I showed you here. I attached the arms and the feet on to the front of the bunny so it looks like he's holding the basket of eggs in his lap. I also add some floral moss into the basket just to give it a little bit of a festive Eastery look. For the feet, I wound up using just the triangles that I cut out and then just cut them into a shape of kind of like a foot. And I hot glued everything to the bottom and just went over with white again to make sure everything is nice and covered. And that's all there is to this guy. So he was a little bit more involved, but not too much. And again, very inexpensive, you know, $3 total to make this guy. And he looks so cute. Because my front porch is not covered, I will be using this little sign on my indoor decor. So if you've watched my previous videos, I got the scrap piece of wood. I got a whole bunch of little scrap pieces of wood like this. So I'm going to use this for my sign. I sanded it just lightly on the sides so that I wouldn't get splinters. It's about 12 inches long. And I'm going to be painting it white in the Rust-Oleum chalked linen white. I do like to do my signs double-sided, so I don't paint the other side until I figure out what I'm using it for. So I might use it at Christmas time or in the summertime. It just really depends. But I do like to reuse them, and that kind of saves on how much stuff I have. As well as if I've purchased them, it kind of saves on money as well. This is going to be a really simple sign. I'm going to just paint it out. I'm going to use my Cricut to cut out the words bunny trail as well as an arrow. Now I'm using the lemon font for the words and then I'm just using a simple arrow. And I am going to cut it out on some stencil vinyl and then I will just dab on some black acrylic paint. So I'm going to speed up the video a little bit just because you don't need to watch that in detail, but just so you know the materials and steps I'm doing. So just before I stencil in the words, I am actually just going to distress the sign as well using that black acrylic paint, and I do this by just dry brushing the edges a little bit darker and then lightly dry brushing the middle of the sign. So I'm not very good at using fine tip brushes to correct any kind of paint that needs to be corrected. So usually I just wind up using a Sharpie. So for this, I'm just using a black Sharpie to fix that R a little bit. So here's the finished product. I think it looks really, really cute. It's gonna go great in my Easter decor. The first DIY, I'm using these plaques that I got from Dollarama. They came in a package of, I believe, 6. And I wind up just using one of the plaques and I'm cutting it in half. And then I'm using one of the halves as a whole, and then I'm going to cut it again in half. I thought I was going to use my miter saw, but I wind up just kind of cutting it with my miter shears. And then I will be painting each of the plaques a different color. I'm using the Rust-Oleum Serenity chalk paint, cotton candy pink acrylic paint, and warm white acrylic paint. After I clean them up, I go ahead and I paint them. And then I use these wooden dowels, square wooden dowels, as my frame around, and I just cut them to size. I wind up staining each of the pieces of dowel in the Rust-Oleum glaze in Java. I love using this as a stain, and all I do is either I use a sponge or just a rag to put it on. Usually I'll do a sponge and then I wipe it off with a rag, which is what I've done here. Then I just hot glue all of these down to fit my frame. For these other two, I wound up having to kind of modify the frame parts a little bit because I ran out of the square dowels. I wouldn't have had enough to make all of them the same, so I wound up using just scrap pieces of wood that I cut into about the shape of the other square dowels. I should have bought 2 packs at Dollarama. Hopefully they have it next time I go because they're proving to be really, really good. I've gotten lots of use out of them. Once I glued the frames down, I wound up writing in Hoppy Easter, Hip and Hop on each of the different frames. Sometimes I use a pencil and then I go over top with a Sharpie. Sometimes I don't. I'm still working on my kind of my Ray Dunn mock font. I don't always want to use my Cricuts, like especially for things that are this small. I tend to like to just write it in. So, practice makes perfect. If you just take your time, you wind up doing a good job on it. And here's what they looked like, all finished. I'm going to be displaying these in my tray, and I'll have that over on my home channel. So if you have some time, stop over on my home channel and check it out. The video will be out by probably middle of next week. And I'm really happy with they turned out. I think they're very cute and they'll go nicely in my little tray. For my next DIY, this is even simpler than the previous one. I'm just writing again in my Ray Dunn font carrots on this clay pot. The clay pot I bought at the Dollar Tree. It was a pack of 2 for $1.25. I'm in Canada. Well, actually, it might be $1.50 now. I'm in Canada, and our Dollar Tree is $1.25. Used to be. Now there's items that are $1.50 and items that are $1.25. So it just depends. I use my pencil and then I go over top of the pencil with a Sharpie, and then I'm going to put some moss into this pot. First I use the green moss at the bottom and then I cover it with some brown moss. You could use floral foam if you wanted to, and then just put a little bit of the brown moss on top to act like dirt. It's up to you. And then I'm putting one of those snowballs from Dollarama that you can get. I'm pretty sure you can get all year long as the bunny's body. And I'm cutting some felt feet onto it, gluing it down. And I'm using a little piece of fur that I got from from Dollarama. And it was just left over. And I'm popping it on as the tail. And then I'm just adding some carrots that I picked up at the Dollar Tree as well into the pot and putting the body in, and that's all there is to this DIY. If you wanted to make sure that the body stayed, you could put a skewer into the snowball and then use the floral foam. Mine's going to go in a tray, no one's going to touch it, so I don't need to have it be in there secure or glued down or anything like that. And that's all there is to this DIY. I think it turned out really cute. Another item for my tray. This is another super easy DIY. I'm just taking some of these wood carrots from the Dollar Tree. They came in a pack of 8, and I am just hot gluing them together. I'm doing 3 of them. I did see Sandra from the Shoreman's Nest do this. I think she did about 6 of them with a bunny to make kind of a thick bunny, which was a really great idea because even with these, then you can get a much bulkier decoration, like decorative item, for $1.25 versus like if you bought them at even like Dollarama or like Walmart or something, it would be at least $3 or $4. And then I'm just painting out the carrot in an orange color. So I paint both of these in the orange. One, I just do a lighter coat. I was originally thinking that I might glue them together to make a really thick carrot, but then I decided I was going to use this lighter colored one for my next project. So to continue on with my current project, once the fully covered orange one dried, I added the top to it. So for the top, I just used some leftover jute rope, and what I did was I glued it on, and then I took little individual, like each individual one, and I just separated them. And I just did enough of pieces just so it covered the top and it looked kind of like an aged carrot. And then I went ahead and I aged the carrot by just lightly putting a little bit of black acrylic paint on it. And that's all there was to this one. So I ended up adding a little bit of distressing with some black acrylic paint, and here's what it came up to. This next DIY is a little bit more involved, but I was going to purchase some orange burlap. However, I could not find it anywhere except for on Amazon, but I found it kind of pricey. Even Michael's didn't have it. And unfortunately, we only have Michael's here and some of the dollar stores, and none of them had it. So I decided to make my own alcohol ink and dye just regular burlap. So I'm just eyeballing this. I'm putting just enough alcohol into the paint so that it makes the paint a little bit smooth but not too liquidy. And then I am just mixing it all together, and I will just dip the burlap into it. The consistency of this was kind of like a thick, like maybe like a milkshake or like buttermilk or something like that. Basically, if you add too much alcohol, rubbing alcohol, it'll dilute it a little bit too much so the color won't be so rich. But if you add a touch less, so I would just kind of start going little by little, and like you have to really do a good job mixing it so you can kind of see that it's thick at the bottom. So I just keep on mixing it until I get that consistency that I'm looking for. So because this was messy, I went to we have like a little workshop and a sink in there. So I went in there, but the lighting is really bad, so I didn't record it. I just dipped the burlap into there, and then I rinsed it off because when I dipped it, because it was so thick, when I dipped it, the little holes from the burlap got clogged with the paint. But then I rinsed it off and it just gave me that nice rich orange color that I was looking for. I did do a second batch where I diluted it a little bit more, but it didn't give me such a rich color, so the thicker paint is better. You could always just buy alcohol ink. I just didn't want to go to the store. Because I wanted strips, I just cut these into strips, and that's what I dyed. So here's what the pieces look like all dyed. So you can see some are a little bit darker and better than others. The best colored ones are the ones that I was telling you that it had a little bit of the thicker mixture. And so all I'm doing is taking that carrot that I had glued together and painted earlier in the video, and I'm just wrapping it around in the burlap, and then I'll be adding some green twine up at the top. Really easy, super easy, and really cute looking DIY carrot. Now, the only thing I'm not liking is that this burlap is kind of poor quality. I'm assuming it is from the dollar store, so that is probably why it's just kind of falling apart as I cut, like as I'm using it and working with it, it kind of falls apart. So it's I haven't had that happen too much before. I've had it happen a little bit, but this seems to be quite a lot. It was a new roll, so maybe it was just a bad batch. So as you can see, I wrapped the burlap around, and then I just went and I cut little strings and tie them together and hot glue them to the top. And then what I do is I like to always separate whether it's jute rope or twine, I like to separate the top. So it's really easy. If you take the top of your rope and you just kind of start pulling it apart, especially if you get like the right string, it pulls apart and then it looks like it's a lot more pieces than it is. And it just makes it a little bit easier than having to glue that many pieces, and then it looks like curly leaves. I'll show you what this looks like at the end, but for the next carrot, I am taking a piece of poster board. Now this is in between poster board and like Bristol board and poster board. It's a little bit softer than Bristol board, but a little bit harder than construction paper. So I do wind up kind of using a roll of paper towel cardboard in there as well, just to make it a bit harder. And I'm kind of making the shape of a carrot with this and just hot gluing it together. You could use white glue or Mod Podge. I just decided to use hot glue because I had it heated and I figured that would be the quickest. And I did the same thing. I wrapped the burlap around, covering mostly one side. I wasn't too concerned about covering the back of this. I did go with orange paper so that you wouldn't be able to see through it at the you know, in case I missed a spot or in case the burlap was a little bit more see-through in a spot, in one spot than was the other. And like I said, I wasn't too concerned about doing all of the sides. I made sure just one side was really nice, like kind of the front and sides were really nice and the back was partially covered. And this was mostly because I was kind of running low on burlap and I still wanted to do a large carrot. If you had the burlap on hand, you could wrap it all around. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you want. I use these in tray decor, so it'll be facing back anyway, so you won't be able to see the back. And I did the same strategy where I attached the green string up at the top and then I took little bits. Well, sorry, I didn't do green string this time. I did jute rope and then I separated it, so you'll see how that looks at the end. So here are both carrots all completed. For this DIY, what I did was I took some clothespins and I'm going to be making them into carrots. Now, I had made these when we went on our Disney cruise as a part of some sort of decor thing. I don't remember, but I participated in all of the fish extender groups and all that stuff, so I think I was a part of something that I had made. I don't even remember anymore. But anyway, I made them like Mickey themed, but I wasn't using them for that now, so I took them apart and I hot glued them together so that they looked like they were in the shape of a carrot. So basically like flip them over. After I hot glued all of them together, I went ahead and I painted them out in this pumpkin orange acrylic paint. I painted almost the entire thing. I just left a little bit over on the top. So if you guys haven't been to my channel, my name is Vesna. This is my DIY channel. I actually have 3 channels altogether. I have a cooking channel and a home channel. On the cooking channel, fairly simple, I provide you guys with recipes that are usually family friendly, and on the home channel I display all of these DIYs that I made. So I'll be having a home tour video this weekend coming out. It'll be a spring home tour video, and then I will be doing an Easter home tour video. So if that's the kind of stuff you like, make sure you subscribe to those 2 channels. On my DIY channel, again, straightforward, I do DIYs, home decor DIYs. I do some renovations that I do over on the home channel, but for the DIY, I do trash or treasure, thrift flips, furniture flips, dollar store flips, all sorts of home decor items on a budget that I like to display in my house. Sometimes they're very much holiday themed, and other times they're just DIYs that you can have as decor in your home. So if that's the kind of stuff you like, make sure you subscribe to my DIY channel. It would be great if you could subscribe to all 3 and watch all 3. Hopefully you could get inspired. So if you have not subscribed, please hit that big subscribe button. Let me know that you did by leaving me a comment. Hit that big like button and also hit the notification bell so that you can see when I post new videos. Thank you. Once they were painted, I went ahead and I had bought this green twine from the Dollar Tree, so I just hot glued the tip of it to the top of the clothespin, and then I wrapped it around so that it looked like it was the top of a carrot. That's what I did with the first one, and then what I did was I put a few pieces together so that it looked like it was, you know, the leaves of the carrot at the top hanging off. And then for the next ones, I wound up kind of doing it the reverse way. I did the strings first, and then I did the ribbon or the twine around. Either way works. I just found this way to be a little bit easier, especially because I was making a few of them. So I actually created these for a few of my DIYs in this video, so it kind of goes together with a few projects. So here's what they look like on their own. So I will be using the carrots in this DIY, and what I'm doing for this one is I'm taking a piece of burlap, I would say about 6 inches of it, and I'm cutting it down, and I'm going to make 2 pieces of it, maybe a little bit less than 6 inches, maybe like 4 inches. And I'm going to be hot gluing it together. You can make this as big or as small as you want. And I hot glue it, and then I flip the sack inside out. And like I said, I'm making a little sack in here. And this is what's going to hold my carrots. The reason I'm flipping it inside out is because it'll make it look seamless. And then I also cut down the sides so that I can have the one end kind of flopped inside. Originally I was just going to write in carrots 5 cents on this, but I didn't like the way it looked on it, so then I wound up doing a little label for it, just using a piece of paper, and I'll show you how I did that. But before I show you that, I do go ahead and I stuff the little bag just with, I put a little bit of leftover jute twine and burlap and whatever, just little scrap pieces of that stuff in there, and then I flap over that top that I cut so that it covers it so you can't see, and then that's how my bag is stuffed. For the label, I'm just using a scrap piece of printer paper. Now I did buy the recycled printer paper, so it's a little bit more yellow than white, which is great for this project. I'm painting it over in the warm white acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree. It's more like an ivory white, kind of like an antique white. And I'm just giving it a nice good coat of it, and then I'll let it dry. And then instead of cutting it, what I do is I just rip it off so the edges kind of look aged and frumpy. I do put my carrots in there, and then I'm just measuring out how big I need to rip it. So I just do that, and then I write in carrots 5 cents. I do it with a pencil first, and then I do it with a Sharpie, and I hot glue it to the little bag, and that's all there is to this one. So here's the bag all finished. Here I'm making another kind of picture frame. I found these little wood planks at Dollarama. They were only $1.25, so for a package of 4. And I also found these dowels, which were, I guess, a package of about 13, 14 in there. Those were a little bit more, but they're kind of like square dowels, which I thought was kind of neat. So I'm going to be using both, and I'm going to be making like just like a little picture frame. So I'm using the thinner dowels, and I'm just measuring out to see how big I need to cut them, and I am using just a power saw to cut these. So I cut them to what I need them, and then I go ahead and just kind of look to plan it out to make sure that they'll fit nice around it, and I go ahead and I stain them. For the stain, I am using the Rust-Oleum glaze in Java as my stain. I love using this for my stain. Once I stain them, I set them off to the side, and I go ahead to work on my plank. I'm just using some leftover white paint. I think it was white with like a touch of pink in there, but very, very pale, not. It was just like a drop of pink because it was on the brush. And I'm just painting out the plank in that color. It didn't really matter that it had that little tint of pink because I go over it in black anyway. So originally I wanted it to look kind of like barn board. So what I did was I drew in these lines, and then I used my Sharpie, and that's where I made the mistake. It was too fake looking in my opinion, so I didn't like the way it looked. So I wound up trying to kind of tone it down with a little bit of brown. I still didn't like it, so I wound up painting it all in black. So I thought I was just going to distress it a little bit, but then I wound up just painting the whole thing in black to get rid of that Sharpie, and I actually like the way it looked this way better. So after I painted it in black, I went ahead and I used an X-Acto knife to cut lines down just 2 lines in the plank to make it look a little bit like barn board. And then I went and I painted over top of it with that warm white that I was using in my previous projects. And I sanded everything down a little bit, and I just really wanted it to look a little bit aged and dinged up and had all sorts of colors coming through. So once I got the colors that I was looking for, I let that dry, and then I went and I hot glued my frame on to the little plank, and then I added some carrots that I also purchased from the Dollar Tree and wrote carrots 5 cents, and that's all there is to this one. For this next DIY, I'm taking some of those carrots that I had made, and I am just cutting them in half. I have these little miter shears, and I'm also then just cutting them on an angle, so you can just turn it to have any angle that you want. And so I'm just cutting them on an angle to make them look a little bit like a carrot, and then I'm going to be using them in the next DIY that I make. So I just wind up putting a little bit more orange onto them for the parts that kind of got chipped. And then the little parts that I cut off, I also make mini carrots out of those. And I just glue the green tops to them as well. So I just take a piece of string, I tie it together, and then I hot glue it to the top. So I got these little pieces of wood. They're like little square dowels from Dollarama, and they came in a package, I believe, of about 15, but they were all different widths. So I'm taking the thinner widths, and I am cutting, these are 2. I'm cutting 2 of them in half to make a frame. Once I have them cut, I've hot glued them together to make a little frame. I then just paint them with that leftover white paint that I used for that previous project, just to have the frame be a little bit white and a little bit distressed. I just distressed the frame a little bit using some black acrylic paint together with that warm white, just to give it a bit of an antique look. And then I hot glue the carrots to it, and that's all there is to this DIY. I attached 2 pieces of string horizontally to the back of the frame with some hot glue, but then decided that I don't like the way that looks, so I just attached them vertically. But unfortunately my camera stopped recording, so I don't have that on camera, but I'll show you what it looks like finished with the carrots then glued to that clothesline. I'm going to be using this Happy Easter sign from the Dollar Tree, which I purchased for $1.25 because our Dollar Tree is $1.25 here. And I'm going to be using it to create a nice little hop sign. And what's great about this is I'm going to reuse the whole sign. I'm going to take it apart, but I'm going to reuse the whole sign, so that way none of it will go to waste. I start with removing the staples from the back to get the little rope off. I thought I would keep the rope, but then I wound up cutting it after. It doesn't really matter how you take it out. I just decided to do it this way. thinking that I might even use the other side too for something. I didn't wind up using it, but you can take it out any way you want. I'm just taking it apart carefully, and then I'm going to be filling the holes at the, like all the holes at the front to with some putty just so that they are covered. I'm going to be taking the nose off. I thought I would be able to leave the face as is, but when I took the nose off and the little bow, some of it peeled off, so I wound up painting it. I did remove the nose carefully because I wanted to be able to keep it, but even if I was careful, the glue was really stuck on there, so it did take off some of the paint. So I just wound up sanding it down and painting it white. You will most likely have to do that as well, unless you're lucky and it doesn't take the, well, not even the paint, it's whatever that paper is that's on there, off. You want to make sure you sand it off because it'll smooth off wherever the paper came off, so it's somewhat even, and so it doesn't show too much when you paint it. And I'm just using the Rust-Oleum Chalk Linen White paint to paint over this bunny. Once I have this bunny painted, I go ahead and I paint the letters. I bought these wooden letters at the Dollar Tree. I bought an H and a P. However, I didn't actually buy an H. I bought an N, which we wound up cutting with my husband, and I wound up gluing it to make an H. So what he did was he cut off the middle part of the end of the N, and then I just flipped the sides over because the way the N is, and he cut down the middle part to make it look like an H. I just measured out how big this P was, and that's what I did. And I just used some wood glue to glue it together. I did this because I could not find an H anywhere, so I wound up just doing it this way. And then I also painted out a paint stick, and I used one of the longer ones that I had from a project, and I painted it out white because that'll be the base for my hop. So here I just show you how I glued it, and this is what I mean by I flipped it over so that the top you would see the nice edges of the N, and then the bottom, as you can see, he just could not cut it for it to look this way, so I told him to just leave it in, that I would cover the bottom so you wouldn't be able to see it. It's obviously better if you can find the H, but I went to 2 Dollar Trees and they did not have it, so I just improvised. I could have also used maybe like cardboard and just cut a few pieces and glued them together for the H and the P, but I decided to do it this way. So after I've painted and dried everything, I go ahead and I distress the sign, and I'm just using some black acrylic paint, and I'll just be putting a little bit on the brush and dabbing it off to give it that aged look. And as you can see, I did not paint the whole bunny sign really well. I left it kind of roughly painted, and that was because I was going to be distressing and just added to it. Now I did add a little bit of white into the black just so it wasn't such a strong black color, so it was a little bit lighter, maybe like a really dark gray. And then I just go ahead and I distress the sides and all over the bunny, as well as the letters and the base. I also distressed the carrots a little bit with that black just to have them kind of match the distressed look of the bunny. And I distressed the base, the paint stir stick as well. I start with attaching the nose because that's going to be my center, and from there I know where I need to draw the eyes and how big I need to make them, as well as the whiskers. I'm just using a black Sharpie to do this. If you are talented enough, you can use a brush. I'm not very good with the fine point brushes. Maybe I don't have good ones. They always kind of wind up looking a little bit sloppy. You could also use, if you want to cut out vinyl stickers, you could do that as well. But this was just as easy, and it was very simple to do. Once I did my distressing, I attached the letters and the bunny. I attached the first letter so I could see where I wanted and how much room I needed for the bunny. And then I attached the second letter. Now the bunny was kind of falling down just on its own. So then I added these little cubes from the Dollar Tree on the back, and I did them quite high just so that the bunny would stick a little bit better. I did use a combination of wood glue and hot glue to attach the bunny, and then I just hot glued the carrots. But as you can see, when I flipped over, that's where I found out that I needed a bit more, and I just kind of made a base for the bunny at the bottom, and then I just built them up a little bit. And that helped the bunny stay. If you're finding that this isn't working, what you could do, so because you can see I played around with it quite a bit, what you could do is build out that bottom part with 2 tumble block pieces of wood and just glue those on and have the bunny stick to that, and then that way it's sticking to a flat surface rather than the round trying to stick to the base. But I didn't have any tumble blocks, so this is what I did. And like I said, once I played around with it a bit and built it up a bit more, it did wind up sticking. And that's all there is to this DIY. It cost around $3, very inexpensive, and I think it looks really cute. And it's something that you could find at like a Winners or a Marshalls for sure. That would be definitely a lot more than $3. So here it is. I absolutely love the way it turned out. Let me know what you think. So this next DIY is another simple DIY. It is a Dollar Tree DIY. So I'm using these jumbo craft sticks as well as the bunny form, all from the Dollar Tree. The bunny form came in a pack of 8, 9, I believe, a big pack of them. And the jumbo craft sticks come in a pack of 20, I think, or 18. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making kind of like a little sign from this. So I'm using 2, 4, 6, I believe, 6 craft sticks, one over top of the other, and then another 2 on the sides. And I will be hot gluing everything together, and then I'm going to be staining it using my Rust-Oleum decorative glaze in Java. I will just clarify, I added one more jumbo craft stick, and I'm going to be using 7 craft sticks plus the 2 on the side, so 9 altogether. And I will be staining everything, and then I'll be painting everything. Now, I wanted the front to have the little sticks on the side, so I just went to make it a little bit stronger. I put some popsicle sticks on the back just to kind of reinforce the little sign. And then I'm going to be covering the bunny in this buffalo check in black and white, this checker pattern in black and white. I got this at the Dollar Tree as well. I got it around Christmas time. I don't know if they have it all year long, but I picked it up then. And I'm just going to be Mod Podging him in this fabric. So what I'm going to do is just cut out a piece as close to what I need as I can, and then I'll Mod Podge it and just kind of glue the excess on the back and cut it out as close as I can to the edge. So I put Mod Podge on the bottom of the fabric and on top of the fabric once I've put it on the wood, so like on the bottom of the wood, and then I put it on top of the fabric. So just make sure you let this dry off before you try to work with it, because sometimes it gets a little bit sticky. So then I go ahead and I paint over top of the sides. I just want it to look like it's framed in this little picture. So I add some white paint, but I'm putting the white paint in a container that had black paint in it, so it's not completely white. It'll give it that little grayish white color, and because I'm painting over top of the brown, it just gives a really kind of rustic feel. And I've also attached some jute rope at the top, just with some glue, hot glue, just in the back at the top, so that if you wanted to hang this, you could. If you just wanted it as a decoration, you could. I will most likely be using this in my tray. So you could leave the sides as is with the white grayish paint, but I decided that I want this to look like it's truly framed in, so I wound up adding another 2 craft sticks, so you actually need 11 on top, and doing the same thing, stain and paint, as I did with the other one. I just think it gives it a little bit more of a complete look, but you could do it either way. I then just make a little burlap bow out of burlap ribbon that has, the adhesive burlap ribbon. I'm using this because it was the thinness that I wanted, I guess, and I thought it would stick, but doesn't stick the best, so even if you use regular burlap, it would be fine. And I just make a tiny little bow at the top, and I add some greenery to it just to give it a little bit of more of a spring touch. And the greenery that I'm adding, I I don't know what it's called. It's from the Dollar Tree. It comes in like a little bunch, like a little pick. I also add some of that checkered fabric into it too to make it look like it's like a true bow with a dimension. So I still wanted to add a little bit more detail to the bunny, so I add like a little bow to the bunny. The bow is made out of twine, and I just kind of wrap some twine around in a loop and twist it to make it look like a bow, and I hot glue it to the bunny's, like around the bunny's neck, so it looks like the bunny's wearing a little bow. So here is the finished piece. Let me know what you think of him. I'm using some more scrap wood. I just have these little, if you've watched my videos before, you saw that my husband brought me back these little small planks of wood that came in some sort of packaging that they were throwing out at his work. So I just cut one little leftover piece in half, and I am painting it out in a mixture of this cashmere tan acrylic paint, which I've put into that little container where I had the black paint, so it kind of gives a little bit of a darker brown paint. And I wanted to show you this because I'm using it kind of like a stain. So I'm putting it on, I put it on liberally, and then I'm taking a wet wipe and I'm just wiping it off so it looks like it's staining the wood in this light brown color. I'm using these bunnies again, and I am just taking a piece of shelf liner, and I am covering them in this, I'm covering the bunny in this shelf liner, cutting it as close as I can to the actual bunny so it takes its shape. And that's all there is to it. I've chosen this diamond pattern teal and white shelf liner because I think it's a very nice Easter color. And then I'm also doing it in one of these floral black and white shelf liners. These are all shelf liners that I had left over from other projects, so I didn't have to purchase them. And I'm just gonna hot glue the bunny down, and I'll wrap each piece of wood, one at the top, one at the bottom, in twine. And again, that's all there is to these projects. Really easy. It cost me, well, under $1 really, because these wood bunnies come in a pack for $1.25, and the twine comes in a big roll, and I only used a little bit, and the shelf liner I had on hand. So after I get everything glued on, I just want to make it a little bit lighter and look a little bit more distressed. So I add some of the warm white acrylic paint onto the wood plank as well, just to give it a little bit more color. And I do the same for the other piece. I think I had said that the other piece was going to be the black and white shelf liner, but it's black and white floral scrapbook paper. But they do have shelf liner like this as well. I just didn't have any on hand, and I wanted this color, so I'm just Mod Podging this one to the bunny, same way I did in the previous project, and then cutting it to size. So here they are all finished. I think these ones are really cute too. Again, you can use them anywhere. I will likely be using them in my tier tray decor. And I just love the way they turned out. Let me know what you think. Well, you guys made it to the very end. This was a long one. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you stuck around, and hopefully you have tons and tons of inspiration for the upcoming spring season, and hopefully gives you a little bit of boost in this dreary, dreary February weather. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe, and happy Valentine's Day.